You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Mimecast. You're wondering if you need more email and collaboration security. Because, as it turns out, just protecting your workspace with M365 isn't good enough. You just watched your entire company grind to a screeching halt, all because someone opened a phishing email. Next time, don't rely on one-size-fits-all security. Protect your inbox with Mimecast and diversify your security stack. For a free trial, go to mimecast.com and keep your business from, falling apart. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems, and protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
I'm a person who monitors Twitter quite a bit, and I started to see noise from Brian Krebs on Mastodon talking about this new zero-day vulnerability in a file transfer application called GoAnywhere MFT, and I'd never heard of that before.
Our guests this week are Emily Austin and Himaja Motheram from security company Censys. They're sharing their research. Months after first GoAnywhere MFT zero-day attacks, Censys still sees approximately 180 public admin panels.
It is advertised as this kind of enterprise file transfer application.
That's Himaja Motheram.
And when we did a little bit of digging into how the service is documented, it seems that it's really intended for sensitive data. It's compliant with a lot of different data protection guidelines and standards, and the types of organizations that we see impacted by breaches are, big enterprise organizations like healthcare institutions, financial institutions, governments even. So a pretty hefty product.
So let's dig into the timeline here. Where did this begin? And again, how did you all decide to head down this path of research?
I think this really started gaining traction in early February when the zero-day was disclosed. The actual security advisory was hidden behind like a customer portal login. And so most of the talk about it came from Twitter. But what really made the story start to jump in discussion was around mid-February, the ransomware gang Clop, which has Russian ties, claimed that it had breached 130 organizations using this exploit. And so that raised some bells. And at first, that claim couldn't really be corroborated by any sources. But as time went on the organization's data leak site, it appears that their claim might have some truth to it. And so far, maybe 2 days ago, there are over 20 organizations that have publicly come forward as being having been affected by this exploit.
Can we talk about the vulnerability itself? What is the specific issue here?
So it appears to be a remote code execution vulnerability in the admin panel interface of the GoAnywhere MFT application. So web client interfaces are not affected, but there's an RCE exploit in the licensing server of admin panel interfaces. And admin panels are, in this case, I would consider them, critical infrastructure. And they offer an interface into, this very sensitive data, and so really have no business being exposed to the public internet. But we see a lot of them are exposed to the public internet, be it through misconfigurations, or maybe some of these were intentionally exposed for some reason or another. But a lot of instances of these admin panels are accessible to this RCE exploit because they're public facing, and would be honestly pretty trivial for even an amateur threat actor to discover.
And so what has Fortra's response been here as this was brought to their attention?
Yeah, so their response has been a little bit criticized because, again, like I said, they hid their security advisory behind a login wall at the beginning. A little bit after that, they did release a patch in version 7.1.2 and offered some other mitigation suggestions for customers. But over the course of the past 3 months, they have misled some customers into believing their data was safe when it wasn't. And only recently, maybe in late April, they published an investigation 2 months after the disclosure. But the response that we're seeing from the affected organizations is that they didn't quite feel like they were being well informed about how their instances were affected by this vulnerability.
And your own research here looks into how many organizations are still exposed here, right?
Yes.
Can you lay that out for us? What did you find?
Yeah. So at the beginning, early February, we saw a lot of admin panels online. We saw around 300 and almost 330 of these admin panels that were publicly exposed and showed indications of running versions that were vulnerable, versions earlier than 7.1.2. Right after that security advisory and some of the discussion on Twitter started peaking on February 2nd, we saw that number drop dramatically from around 330 to maybe 250. And since then, we've kind of seen this very slow, steady decrease in that number of exposed hosts that look like they're running vulnerable versions. And as of 2 days ago on May 15th, we see 50. And so that's encouraging that it's dropped so much from when the original 0 day was disclosed. But 50 admin panels online, that those could be the portal to a wealth of sensitive data that could infect millions of people. So we're still concerned about how this patching rate is starting to kind of plateau over the past couple weeks.
Emily, I'm interested in your insights here as well. What is your take on the information you've gathered here?
Yeah. So one thing I'd like to point out, we're talking about this vulnerability.
That's Emily Austin.
In context, several other researchers have published really excellent reviews and kind of deep dives into the remote code execution exploit itself. And so where I think we really have a lot to offer, and as Himaja has kind of just walked through, is being able to look at this vulnerability and others that have some kind of, public internet-facing artifact available, a login page, a ransom note on a public-facing service. We can see those things and we can kind of zoom out a little bit and take a more macro look at the state of the vulnerability as it might be across the internet. What are the potential ramifications of this vulnerability if it were exploited to the maximum potential, right? How many devices do we see that could potentially fall victim to it? And so that's been really interesting to track here and see over time, how we've been able to see this go from this dramatic decrease initially, and then just kind of tapering off slowly. And we're kind of still seeing these still hanging around. So it's been interesting to see that. And it also kind of ties back to this whole idea, of security hygiene. I know that's something that we talk about a lot, and it's something that, it's not exciting necessarily, but asset management, understanding the devices that are within your organization's purview, that's really important. And understanding, I think the GoAnywhere, their initial advisory said, most of these instances should be behind a VPN or a firewall of some kind, but there's also this implication that some of them aren't, and they're aware of that. And, we see evidence of that in our data. And so I think being aware of those things as an administrator of these tools is really important. But yeah, so I think what's really cool about what we've been able to do here is looking at this vulnerability kind of on a global scale and saying, okay, well, what are the potential ramifications of this? How many organizations do we see that potentially could still be affected by it?
And when you look at that, what do you see? What conclusions have you all come to?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think really the big thing is we're seeing that organizations just aren't necessarily prioritizing asset management, patch management, and vulnerability management. We talk a ton about new exploits and things that get released, but really, and this was kind of a perfect storm, right? So you have this 0 day in a device or in a service rather, whose admin pages oftentimes are exposed to the internet unprotected. So it's kind of this like perfect mix of you do have a 0 day and you have something improperly exposed to the internet that just makes it really trivial, as Himaja said, to exploit and, cause havoc, steal data, and do what you will.
Himaja, I'm curious. Certainly not all patches are created equal and everybody's situation is different of the infrastructure that they're running. Is there anything particularly burdensome in this update that you see that would cause people to lag behind or delay making the updates?
That's a great question. And I don't know the particular intricacies of the patch that might relate to that. But my hypothesis is honestly that we're seeing this patch rate plateau mostly because a lot of these assets are probably exposed unintentionally is my guess, and that some of them might even be old or legacy infrastructure that has just been kind of abandoned, or maybe their service owners are not quite clear in the organization, and they're kind of these endpoints that are just left without any tending. Because applying the patch is like Emily said, a part of basic security hygiene, and it's a pretty simple process when you know what to apply it to. So I'm thinking that these assets are kind of those unknown unknowns in an organization potentially, and that's why these basic security hygiene practices aren't being fulfilled.
Emily, based on the information that you all have gathered here, what are your recommendations?
I think you could probably guess they're not going to be exciting. They're going to be beyond like GoAnywhere specifically, right? Like get it off of the internet if it's on the internet, if it's exposed to the internet, the admin panel specifically, patch it to version 7.1.2. That's GoAnywhere specifically. But just more broadly speaking, again, understanding what assets are within your organization's control, like the things that you do own, getting a handle on that. It's not an easy process, but it's really, really important. So because you can't manage vulnerabilities or patches if you don't know all of the things that you need to patch or manage, right? So I think those are really critical pieces of a security program. They're critical pieces of, strong security posture. And so just being aware of those things that are those like kind of back office applications, things that, are, essential to business function as a tool like this is, allowing you to transfer data between organizations or within an organization. Yeah. So I think figuring out if you own any of these devices, understanding where they are in your network, and understanding that something needs to be done about them. They do need to be kept off of the public internet, right? I think that's a huge piece here. And so all of those things come together to kind of help you create a stronger security posture for your organization.
Our thanks to Himaja Motheram and Emily Austin from Censys for joining us. The research is titled Months After First GoAnywhere MFT 0-Day Attacks, Censys Still Sees Approximately 180 Public Admin Panels. We'll have a link in the show notes. And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. The CyberWire Research Saturday podcast is a production of N2K Networks, proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Elliot Peltzman, our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. Hello, listeners. We're always looking for ways to improve the CyberWire network to give you an intelligence-driven news experience that saves you time and keeps you in the know on the latest developments in cybersecurity. We'd like to hear your feedback in our 2023 audience survey. Complete this survey for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Visit thecyberwire.com/survey. That's thecyberwire.com/survey and share your feedback. Thanks.